Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast, where I'm going to be speaking with John Montross from the Punk Rock Radar to talk about music, punk music specifically, and how Punk Rock Radar helps keep fans in the know about upcoming albums and good punk music that comes out. We'll hear what John has to say right after this. You're listening to the Powered by Rock podcast with your host, Isaac Kuhlman. The Powered by Rock podcast was created to help showcase some of the best rock musicians in the world and to pass on to future generations the rock music that has inspired rock fans around the world for decades. We want listeners to be able to hear great stories and life experiences directly from their favorite artists, as well as dig deeper into music theory and talk rock like no other show you've ever heard. This isn't about looking cool, it's about getting real and having a great time. Without further ado, let's start the show. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. Today's episode is going to be a lot of fun because I get to speak with another fellow punk rock lover, John Montross from Punk Rock Radar, about punk music and how he's put together a site to help keep fans up to date on upcoming punk album releases. Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Isaac. Thank you so much for having me. And by the way, that intro is badass. That let's start the show. I like that.
Yeah, I worked on it. It was kind of a work in progress for a while, but it all kind of came around. The song in there is one of my friends' bands. Well, actually, a few of my friends were in a band together, and that song's just so rocking that I was like, I got to use that for whatever podcast that I'm going to use for the rest of my life, and they were happy to let me use it. But yeah, it gets me pumped every time I hear that intro because I'm like, yeah,
it's killer, man. I like it.
Very cool. All right, so before we get into some of the other great topics about punk music and how we love every all the stuff we love from 2021 and before that, let's kind of give the story of how you got into punk music, how you became passionate enough to start Punk Rock Radar, and what's kind of going on with Punk Rock Radar now, and what's the goal with that site.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of my generation's going to have that same story. I got into punk with Dookie in 1994, right?
Yeah.
Same year that Smash came out, like kind of the year punk broke, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I never looked back. There were some little, dark spots here and there. I was a big nu metal kid. Yeah. I was big into hard rock and Korn, Limp Bizkit, Orgy, Incubus, all those guys. I loved it. Then once Enema of the State came out again, I was in high school. It was like the perfect time for that genre to hit me. And from there, I never looked back. I was all about all the fat comps and the Warped Tour comps like Springman, Theologian. I collected all those as fast as I could, found as many bands as I could. Exactly.
Yeah.
And from there, I've just been all about finding new bands. Whether I was Napster, mp3.com back then, I've always, wanted to hear all the bands I could. I just love the music and I want to hear them, want to share them.
Yeah. So then how did that kind of parlay into you starting Punk Rock Radar and what was the kind of emphasis or the beginning of why you actually decided to do that?
It's funny. This has been such a long time coming, right? Back in the day too, I had, you remember you had like an AOL page for yourself, for your profile?
Yeah.
I used to do small bands on that, like way, way, way back. And, we're talking 20 years ago. But ever since, like, I've always looked for new bands. Like every Friday, I would pull up like the punk site and Screaming Fastcore and Punk Rock Mag, and I try to just find what came out today. And, I'm not going to say anything good about COVID, but it did give me a lot of time to like think about how can I do this? How can I put all this out there in one spot?
Yeah.
So basically one morning I was like, what came out today? And I made a list and I was like, why don't I just share this with everyone? There's so many good bands, like 2021. There's so many punk bands. It's so accessible to us. We don't have to go to a record store or anything. Yeah. It's all right in front of us. So let's just share it with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was kind of one of the big things. I actually grew up in almost probably what year did you graduate high school?
2003.
Okay. So I graduated in 2000. So basically the same era. And, when I was back in high school, I lived in freaking North Dakota. So like trying to find any information about punk bands or, underground music or indie rock was impossible. Like I had to watch like 120 minutes with Matt Pinfield to even get like a little bit of taste of like what there
Yeah.
was out there in the world
You
other
remember
than what's on the radio.
farmclub.com? You remember that that show?
I don't think so. I don't think I ever saw that one.
Matt Pinfield, he ran it. I think it was on USA. They would
Okay.
have like some random alternative rock bands on it. I think that's where like Dynamite Hack was on it. A
Gotcha.
couple of like rock and punk bands, he would have it. I think it was on USA. But
Nice.
yeah, it was a cool show back then.
That's very cool. Yeah. So that must have been probably right after 2000 then or something, because I
Yeah.
probably was in college at the time and didn't have cable. So that's why I didn't see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very cool. I mean, obviously, you know, trying to get that information was literally, like I said, like you couldn't do it. And so like to have something like Punk Rock Radar now, if we had that 20 years ago, it'd have been phenomenal. Like, hey, check out all these bands. If you like this band, you can check out these bands and stuff like that. So yeah. So where do you see it going? Is this just something that you're going to kind of keep doing just to see how it goes and help people kind of get, you know, exposure to new music all the time?
That's the plan. I'm finally getting some of my buddies to come on board and help, because I didn't realize how much work it was going to be
Yeah.
to not only find them, but then get all that album art, put all these posts together. It started as a hobby and it quickly became like a job, right? Yeah. But now I've got
quit your job, John. Come on.
I wish. Hey, I want to say that it is Friday, so happy Friday, but it's that Friday after New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve. So it's the first 5-day work week. So I'm feeling good right now. But yeah, Punk Rock Radar, the future's bright. We're going to keep pumping and keep getting this stuff out to everybody.
Awesome. So yeah, let's talk about 2021 since you brought up the new year. Obviously, you know, I like to get your take on the punk music that, you know, we listen to and what your thoughts are, because after making a list, at least I think you ranked it in order. Looking at your top list, a top list of top 2021 albums, obviously punk music, you put Krang's album "Make Arcade Great Again" at the top of the list. Now I listened to this album, I think it's great. I didn't actually get a chance to review it officially, unfortunately, during the 2021, because I think I did like 60 album reviews, and like you said, it's a lot of work to try to run a site where you're writing and then trying to do video blogs and all this other stuff. So you got to kind of pace yourself and not just wear yourself out. But I was just curious as to why you put that as number one for 2021. What did you like about Krang's album on there that kind of put it in there for you?
So my favorite two like subgenres of punk are pop punk and skate punk.
Yeah.
And I think these guys just kind of nailed that sound. Like the album is aggressive, but it's also got parts where like you're singing along.
Yeah.
Like it's got like these fast drums, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's that chorus. And that's like a hard niche to really hit.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of times nowadays, it's either going to be fast or it's going to be super catchy. And I think these guys just killed it. Like they just put that sound out that I look for. It's kind of got that epitaph fat sound mixed in with like that early 2000s pop punk. So it was just perfect for me.
Yeah. And obviously I listened to it, and immediately when I first heard it, I was like, man, this sounds a lot like some like the Rufio stuff from back in the day and some of these other bands that were just really good at doing that. And then short-lived, most of those bands were short-lived because they just couldn't keep doing it for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, it definitely brings back the year 2000 or 1999 or something like that. And it's just a perfect little, and it's only like 22 minit's long. I think it's like 10 songs and everything's like 2 minutes. It's like, okay, you're done with this one before you can even get a workout in. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's good to see, because I was going to ask you about what kind of genres you like, because obviously I didn't see Face to Face, which had an album and a couple other bands on there. So I do want to talk about some of these other bigger bands out there. And obviously we kind of have preference to things that maybe we discover versus what's kind of popular out there. But I personally think that Face to Face put out one of the best, and I have other ones. You had the copyrights on there. That's probably my favorite punk album of all of 2021. It's absolutely fantastic. But I think Face to Face put out a great album. I was just curious why they might not be on your list. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard of them. They've been around for a couple of decades now. But what was it about their album that maybe didn't put it up there? Or what's your thoughts on the albums?
I love Face to Face. First of all, let me say that I did really enjoy the record, and I had it on. Right. Here's the thing. When I was doing the best songs of each one, I was going through, I was trying to find my best Face to Face song that I really liked, and I would play them. And then it just, every song kind of seemed to go on a little bit too long for me. Like they're all in like that 4-minute range, 3:30. And for like that 3-chord punk rock sound, I feel like that 2:30, 3 minutes is the sweet spot. Otherwise, you're hearing the same chorus
Too many
6, 7,
times.
8 times.
Yeah.
Like that's what turned me off about it. Now it's super catchy, and some of those choruses are awesome. I just didn't want to hear them 6, 7, 8 times. That's all.
Gotcha.
But love Face to Face. I think it's their best record since maybe the self-titled in '97. I really did enjoy it, but the songs dragged on a little too long.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And obviously on one of your recent YouTube videos, I commented about how you mentioned that as a fan of NoFX albums, that the single album was not very good. You didn't like it. Shouldn't be in
No.
top 10 lists. What type of music do you want to see from NoFX, and where do you think they went wrong with the single album?
So NoFX was my favorite band from like 2000 all the way probably until 2015, and they just kind of started to dip for me. Like
Yeah.
it was this latest trilogy of mediocrity that kind of, shut me off. But I just feel like I listened to NoFX for like that fast, fun, but at the same time serious. And this is just a little too heavy for me. And like Fat Mike's voice, I'm not crazy about nowadays. It kind of sounds like he just woke up. Like when I asked my wife to make me a coffee, I kind of got the voice that Fat Mike sings with now. It just sounds a little too tired for me. Like I need a little more pep and lightheartedness from them. I think that's their specialty.
Yeah, and obviously pretty much the whole single album is it's a retrospective album of Fat Mike's life, all the friends that he's lost, the addictions they've had, and just a lot of stuff. So I mean, obviously this is coming from right around, I think it was around 2010 or 12, somewhere in there, where he started doing the Cokie the Clown character, where he got really super dark and really super like in people's faces about how like messed up you can be. And yeah, ever since then it's been a complete like 180 as far as the lyrics and the subject matter. But I mean, I guess maybe punks grow up. I don't know. I don't think that Fat Mike's grown up necessarily. I think he's just reflecting on the shit that's happened to him in his life. So in my opinion, I like the album for that. I do like some of the Big Drag, I think, is a great song. Fish in a Gun Barrel is a pretty good little anti gun kind of song. That one's probably the closest to what they have, like Murder the Government, or one of them songs about anti-government and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's if you don't want to listen to some dark, heavy stuff, it's going to turn you off, I think. And I'm the kind of guy that doesn't drink coffee, so I just get all my energy from the world around me, I guess. And if you need energy from the world around you, that one's definitely going to bum you out.
Well, and one other thing I want to point out too, when I did my list, I kind of purposefully wanted it to be mostly like smaller bands too. I still listen to that NoFX album a lot. Like I still do love NoFX. It's not the preferred version of NoFX I like, but I mean, I could totally see why people enjoy it. Same thing with Face to Face. It just didn't hit for me the way the stuff normally does. Sure. And it could be, I just expect something different from them, which I probably shouldn't anymore. And that's probably the reason why it just didn't make it for me.
Yeah, of course. So now I know that each of us humans have so many hours in a day to listen to new music, and it seems like you put a ton of effort into trying to keep up. I know for myself that it's insanely hard to do for any single individual. I say it's actually probably impossible because, like I said, we can't review everything. We can't write about everything. We can't even list everything half the time. I try to scour like search pages just to see like what's coming out, and it takes a lot of effort. So what's your take on the effort you have to put into scouring through all this music to get to the gems? Because not all of them are gems.
No. Well, I have to say I've been getting a lot more bands actually posting it to the website, which if you did that, thank you. But basically I do rely on the Spotify release radar quite a bit. I have my own little method that everyone I tell this to thinks I'm crazy. I have 3 playlists. I have one that's called my lunchbox, which is new music that people send me or that just came out. If I listen to it and I like it, I put it in what I call my fridge playlist. And then from there, if I love it, it goes into my freezer playlist. And I work from home, so all day I've got that lunchbox rolling, right?
Nice.
And I'm just listening to it nonstop, 8 hours a day, every day. And everything that catches my ear, I make a note and I try to at least shout those guys out.
Nice.
make sure people are listening to it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have to skip stuff at some points, or you just listen to it to pretty much torture yourself?
If a band sends me their album, I will listen to it, and I'll do my best to listen to the entirety of it. But oh yeah, do I skip things? Hell yeah, a lot. I skip a lot of stuff, and a lot of I try to stay positive as much as I could, but like some of the stuff, like if I'm on Bandcamp, I'll like put something random on, and I'm like, man, like can't these kids just buy like a $60 Focusrite? Like how is this even recorded? Like it's like just squealing and like the levels are all over the place. But I guess some people are listening to that, and more power to them.
Yeah, I think obviously when I was, the difference between what you can record now at home versus what I could record when I was in a punk band in high school, so different. Like we would try to record, but we'd have like a camcorder. We didn't even have cell phones back then. Like we didn't have cell phones that could record anything. So we'd do it on a camcorder and set the camcorder like way at the back of the room and try to play it. And it sounded so bad, but we're like, this is the best we got because we have no recording equipment. It didn't exist at a reasonable, accommodating price. But now you can pretty much get set up for, I know it's expensive for high school kids or whatever, but get it for your birthday or Christmas or whatever, $500-600, you can have a decent little setup and get recording like really, especially if you spend some time, mixing and mastering it to be okay, you can have a pretty good sound right out of your garage or your bedroom or whatever. So I think it is pretty important now to don't just send in a demo tape like, oh, this is what we recorded on our phone and you guys should like it because this is kind of what we sound like. It's like, we can't tell what you sound like.
I do get the phone recordings quite a bit, man. I'll be honest, that it is rough.
Yeah. It's like, man, like, just all you hear is like smashing and loud blaring and like, it's terrible.
It's just nonstop treble. That should be the name of the band.
Yeah. It's like, is there a bass player in here? Because I can't tell if there is. So let's talk a little bit about ska. What are your feelings on ska? I know a lot of ska bands are also kind of partly punk or play half and half, and vice versa. Do you feel like since like the early to mid 90s, these two genres are kind of interconnected in a lot of ways?
That's a great way to put it, actually. And I'm a huge fan of ska, and I feel like we're in like definitely like a ska revival.
Yeah.
And like just last year, I know Abracadabra is on my list. Those, super cool guys. They've got 2 awesome records out now, and Joystick is on there. Another great band. I know that like We Are the Union put out a really good record too. Yeah. And another
Big D and the Kids Table, I think, had one.
The Big D record. That's right.
Pretty decent. Yeah. It's a little too poppy for my taste for ska, but it was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm up here, like I got my stand-up desk here. Every time that came on, I'm doing like a little skank at my desk. It's jazzy. It gets you going. Yeah. But yeah, I love ska music. I'm really glad that it's coming back.
Yeah.
Because for a while, like in the early 2010s, when it was like all easycore, there were like no ska bands popping up anywhere.
Yeah. So, it was definitely a lot of the super like poppy punk bands. I remember like, Simple Plan and a lot of these, like, I don't even know if you'd call them, I guess you call them punk bands, but I don't know if I would. Basically they were boy bands that just happened to be in the punk genre.
Yeah. I have like a love-hate relationship with that era because I was in high school at that time too. So like I loved, but I didn't tell anybody. Good Charlotte and Newfound Glory, all those bands. I come to school in my Rancid shirt and my mohawk, and I'd be like, "Oh, those bands suck," and then I go home and I'm listening to it. I can fess up to it now, but it's definitely like teetering on that border for sure.
Yeah, cool. So let's break down a few of the decades over the years because I'd like to know a little bit more about your favorite bands from basically the 90s and beyond. So starting in the 90s, who are some of your favorite punk bands that obviously you talked about Green Day, you've talked about NOFX, and Face to Face, but what were some of the bands that you kind of would say, these are the bands I listen to? Because, some people would say, oh, if you're not starting with like the Ramones, then Descendants and like some of these other bands, then you've missed a genre or you've missed a good chunk of punk. But I didn't really get into the Ramones. Like I still don't listen to the Ramones that much. I still don't listen to the Misfits all that much. There's a whole decade where to go back that far and to hear the recordings that they would put out, it was too rough for me to like spend a lot of time on. Had I grown up in that era it'd have been very easy because it's what was coming out at the time. But I'd just like to get your kind of take on 90s, and then we'll go 2000s, 2010s.
So for the 90s, like you said, it's definitely going to be Green Day, Blink, NoFX. For me, it would be 1, 2, 3. I also got into Less Than Jake in the 90s big time.
Yeah.
Let me think. Like all those pulley, 10-foot pole, I was really into. I had gotten those Punkorama comps, and that was like Bible to me.
Yeah.
But all those like fat Epitaph bands, fat Lagwagon, Strung Out, I was all about those.
Yeah. Two of the ones that I really got into from those compilations that I'd never heard before were Millencolin and Bracket.
Awesome.
Freaking love Bracket too.
That one Bracket album, I feel like they don't get enough credit. There's the one that has The Girl from Marin, I think is the first track. That album is so good. Like, and I never hear anyone talk about that record. That's actually my favorite one by them.
Yeah. Is it Novelty Forever, or is it the next one after that? No, it is the next one after that.
All Else Fails, is it called?
When All Else Fails. Yeah.
Okay.
Novelty Forever is kind of one that got them big, but yeah.
Yeah, so for the 90s too, and I have to say I was definitely into like the one-hit wonder bands, like your Harvey Dangers, your Semisonics, your Eve 6. I was all into that stuff too. That was big. Those bands were big for me in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, we only had cassettes on the radio, so
yeah, exactly.
It was what it was.
Yeah. It's funny because when we were talking about Bracket, I had mentioned to Angelo Celli from Bracket, the guitar player from Bracket, that was my favorite album too. And he's like, yeah, Marty, the lead singer, didn't like it because he couldn't spend much time on it, but like thought it was the best album they put out. I was like, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's pretty cool. All right, so let's jump into the 2000s. So after my graduation of high school, what kind of stuff did you get into?
It was honestly, I was riding that fat Epitaph wave for a while, straight into the 2000s. But then you had that like eruption, that second hit. You had the 94, 99, and then like after Blink, there was that whole wave of, you know, what you were saying before.
Swooping up, yeah.
I got into like Newfound Glory big time. I got into, let me think, who else is out there?
Well, one band I know is like Alkaline Trio.
Yes, I love Alkaline Trio.
Yeah. And that was, yeah.
What do you think about those, like the drive-through bands? Like I remember drive-through being huge.
I was huge with Midtown. I liked a lot of those. Actually, Midtown didn't sign with drive-through. I think they were supposed to, and then they canceled their contract or whatever. But yeah, like a lot of those drive-through bands were pretty good. I did not like stuff like Dashboard Confessional, for example. Too emo for me. I was like, damn, dude, you need some therapy, and it's not supposed to be put up to a record. But yeah, there was a lot of those bands out there. I'm trying to think of who else was even on drive-through, but MXPX was one that went from mid 90s all the way, probably still, like I still listen to them. They pump out like a new album seemingly like every year. It's like insane how much work they do. But yeah, I mean, those were Alkaline Trio is probably the biggest band from the 2000s that I didn't know of, obviously in the 90s, that I still listen to it now.
Yeah. And growing up, like I used to live a lot closer to the city. So around the turn of 2000, I really started going to shows. So back then it was, you were going to see H2O, Bouncing Souls, or like I think Midtown's from Jersey too, actually.
They are,
Lifetime. Those bands like were playing every weekend. And the Movie Life, of course, the Movie Life is one of my favorites. So more into like that New York, New Jersey scene I got into once I started going to shows, you know, every single weekend. So those guys for sure.
Yeah, and that was probably, I mean, that was a pretty big explosion time for that particular scene, because punk used to just be California pretty much. Like if you're not in California, you're not in a punk band, really. You're just making music somewhere else. And then it really did start to hit the East Coast again for like the second time. Obviously they were big in the 80s and stuff, but it kind of got left out in the 90s, and then obviously kind of came back around in the 2000s. So let's move on to the 2010s. What kind of bands were you listening to in 2010s? Maybe some new people kind of cropped up there.
So I didn't really, I feel like 2010 is when that, what they call sad boy came out, like your Man Overboard genre.
Yeah.
I didn't really get into that, but I did like 4 Year Strong and Set Your Goals, like that style where it was kind of like very Newfound Glory based, but a little heavier.
Yeah.
I got into those guys. let's see, back in 2010. I'm trying to put myself. I
And you
was
could go
living in
all the way up to
Jersey at the
2020.
time.
So you can even think about what you've got into like 2015 and beyond, obviously. So
Yeah. Well, now like I feel like there's like a couple like those big hitter labels right now. You got like People of Punk Rock Records. Everything they put out is awesome. Thousand
yeah,
Island Records,
yeah,
like with Belvedere and Our Dying Days. Like so many freaking good bands on those labels.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the bands, because I didn't get into the copyrights real early in their
Oh
career, but
yeah,
around to 2010, I started listening to them. Forgot all about them somehow. Like it was like a year maybe I spent listening to them. And then when they came back this last year in 2021, I was like, is that the same band? That I haven't heard of them in like 10 years. So I had to double check, and I was like, holy shit, they still making music. And that's when I talked to Adam Fletcher from there, from the copyrights. And he's like, yep, same band. I was like, and this freaking thing was awesome. Like the new album was freaking incredible. But yeah, I mean, there's so many incredible bands that I probably didn't like from 2010 to 2020. I kind of slept on punk. I kind of switched over to indie and alt rock and kind of slept on punk because I was getting into my 30s. I was like,
yeah,
punk's a little too old now. I'm a little too old for punk, but I still listen to some NOFX in there and some other bands, but it was hard to keep up. And, Less Than Jake would put out an album, didn't even hear about it because it wasn't like on major labels anymore. It wasn't like it was being broadcast on radio or anything. There's nothing. So if it wasn't like you had your ear to the ground, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. So, but yeah, there's definitely some bands in there that I still feel like I have to go check out because I definitely missed a bunch.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the copyrights again. That's definitely a band I got into probably around like 2010 or so. Like it was We Didn't Come Here to Die, I think is the one I had first, or
Gotcha.
What's the one with Cashiers on it? I forget what it's called, but yeah, that new record they put out is killer. And I listen to Tell Molly all the time. It's one of my favorite copyright songs that they put out, and Halos too.
Yeah,
man,
it's funny because Tell Molly's probably my least favorite on that album, just because it's so poppy. But I'm like, every other song on there is fucking rocking.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with that song. I get stuck in my head.
Yeah,
and I have to listen to it. It's just they just wrote the catchiest song of the year. It's just that damn good.
Halos is definitely another one where it's very anthemic and you sing along to it very, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the last 2 years now, since 2020, obviously it's really only been 2020 and 2021 pandemic, right? So like what kind of bands were you getting into that maybe you never heard of, or were some old school bands kind of making a comeback? Goldfinger was kind of doing a little comeback, but I don't think they released any new music, but they were kind of rebroadcasting, doing like, covers of their own songs, or, doing concerts of their own songs and stuff, which kind of brought them back. And I totally forgot about those guys. And I was like, man, I used to listen to Goldfinger shitloads when I was in like junior high and high school.
Yeah.
Anything in the last 2 years that has kind of crept in that you're like, this band's absolutely incredible? Like, I'm glad they're
actually
around.
I'm up here up north, and I've got an old friend here. He's a huge Metallica guy. Like he's huge into like the big four thrash bands. So like we've been like jamming together. So like I started to look for bands that kind of like blend like a little bit of thrash and punk. And there's been like quite a few. Like I never heard of Dinosaur Pile Up until a couple, maybe I had found them on the Signal Chords, actually, Instagram. Dinosaur Pile Up has got to be my favorite band like of the last couple years. Like I listened to that record front to back so many times. Like it's just such a fun like mix of thrash and hard rock and pop punk. And same thing with the Dirty Nil. Like the new one, not so much. I love the new one. It's my favorite thing they've ever released by far. But the older stuff kind of blends like almost like classic rock and pop punk almost.
Interesting.
So like I was trying to like, play. I don't know like a lot about thrash or anything. So I was trying to get into bands blending that style. So those two are like recent bands I've really been into.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually have never heard of either of them. So I'll have to check those guys out because
definitely. Two of my favorite records of the last decade.
Nice.
The Dirty Nil, the latest one, and Dinosaur Pile Up by Celebrity Mansions, it's called. It's phenomenal.
Excellent. I'll have to check them out. So there's obviously some things about punk rock that I would say great community, great, people are very down to earth, very humble. But then there's other things about punk rock scene that are like, that's so cliche, like whatever, like this is like, not everybody has to dress the same to be a punk, but are there some things about the punk music scene that you love, or what are some of your favorite things about it? And what are some of the things you don't like about the punk music scene?
Well, I feel like right now the punk rock scene is a lot more like accepting, and like there's no more like really, oh, that's too poppy. It's too poppy. Like if anything, like it's poppier than it's ever been. Like all this stuff like Travis Barker's putting out, and like it's all this mainstream stuff. Like no one's really saying, oh, that's too poppy, which is like bizarre for me. Like I don't see any pushback about that, which is great. But at the same time, I'll be honest, I cannot get into that like new punk sound at all. I'll do my gatekeeper fingers. It's just not for me in any capacity. I really, really tried to get into it because I feel like the more people listening, the more people playing it, but I just can't get behind it. I can't get into the new scene. They're calling me old head and everything, but whatever. I can't get into it.
Yeah, well, I had my wife's sister say that, oh yeah, pop punk's making a comeback. I was like, yeah, it is. And she's like, ever since Machine Gun Kelly did a pop punk album, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was like,
man, that's every
really
time I say punk rock radar now to like someone who's not like, you know, versed. Oh, you mean like Machine Gun Kelly? I'm like, yeah, I guess, you know, sure.
I was like, is that what people think pop punk music is now? Is Machine Gun Kelly? Because I would not, I wouldn't even have classified that. I was just like, yeah, that's just pop music done by a guy who can play an instrument, but is kind of a rapper. Like that's what he was known for, right? It's like when Post Malone goes out and does, you know, Nirvana covers. I'm like, that's still pop music. You're just playing grunge covers. Like that's not alt rock or grunge rock. You're just a pop musician. So yeah, I mean, anyone with a lick of talent can obviously cross genres, but I would say calling that pop punk or saying that Machine Gun Kelly has brought back pop punk is pretty much the most disrespectful thing I've heard in a long time.
He brought pop punk back into the limelight, but like, did he do anything for it, like genre bending or genre improving? I don't think so. But
no, yeah.
If kids are gonna start picking up guitar and stuff now because they saw Machine Gun Kelly, more power to him. That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously you have a list of things that are coming out in 2022. We've talked a little bit through Instagram about some of these exciting bands that might be coming out with some new music and all that. But what are some of the most exciting albums that you're looking forward to, or some of the bands that might be popping up in 2022?
Well, I'll be honest. I got up this morning and I was like, holy shit, there's a new Wilhelm Scream song. I didn't see it, and if that is leading to an album, which I believe it is, I think I saw it, then hell yeah. Give me Wilhelm Scream all day long. Love those guys. Other stuff I'm looking for. I talked to the dudes in Part-Time Killer. They were on my top EP list. I hope they're putting out a record, but that EP is awesome. If they put out an LP, that's going to be in my top. Let me see. I'm actually cheating. I'm looking at my list here now.
All right. I know it's hard to remember because you're like, wait, what year is it? It just started a new year.
Yeah. Well, the Still Insane band, they've got an EP coming out in February, which I'm definitely looking forward to. And I say the last one is a band I didn't really know of. I found them randomly on Bandcamp. Is Screed, and that album's called What Have We All Become. It comes out in May. That single they put out a couple weeks ago is awesome, and I have high expectations for that record for sure. Nice.
Very cool. So that's what's on the radar then.
Right on, exactly.
All right, John, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. We'll add some links to the show, to your guys' site and everything, to the show notes below this episode. But do you have anything you'd like to plug or anything you want to say to any listeners, readers, followers out there before we go today?
Absolutely, yeah. My buddy Matt and I we started our YouTube show. It premiered last week. We reviewed all the NOFX records. Tomorrow we're going to do Less Than Jake. We've got Green Day, Bad Religion on deck, and then we're going to start to hit like labels, Fat, Epitaph, and Drive Through up there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Check it out, Punk Rock Radar on YouTube.
Fantastic. Obviously, yeah. Thanks again for being here, John. Thanks for the awesome conversation. If you haven't checked out the site yet, or follow them on Instagram, definitely do that. Go to the show notes below this episode for the links. If you like what you heard on the show today, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends on social media. You can see the full interview on our YouTube channel as well. Also, if you want to check out some of our written content or any of the products or merch that we have available, go to poweredbyrock.com to read our absolutely free rocking blog full of album interviews. I'm going to cut that because I just fucked that up. But also, if you want to check out some of our written content or any of the products or merch that we have available, go to poweredbyrock.com to read our absolutely free rocking blog full of album reviews, interviews, and lists to keep you entertained. And find our gear as well so you can pick up some items to look and play like a rock legend. That's our show for today. We'll see you soon for the next episode. Until then, rock on.